Hey everybody, this is Perch, and I talk business stuff on this channel from time to time with comics. And it's interesting because I'm always assuming nobody cares about this stuff. That this is the boring stuff that people don't dislike about the channel. And generally speaking, a lot of you have been very insistent that's not the case. You like to hear it. I know it does bore some people, but I do believe that everybody's a functional adult and they're able to unclick, and I try not to do clickbait unless it's a pure joke with the headline of this. So you kind of know what you're in for when you click on this stuff. But this goes into a business like question, and it's going to use a lot of words that feel like marketing buzzwords, but it's still valid, I promise. The other reaction I get, which I find a bit comical, is people will say things like, Perch doesn't know the comic business. That's not how the comic business works. Perch doesn't know it. And what's usually the case is one of two things. Either the person is so low level, these are not conversations they're having. Like I had a inker chew me out for not knowing what the comic business was like. He doesn't know. And we were talking about kind of percentage of margin on distribution. It's like, buddy, you are not in those conversations. I think you should learn, but this is not anything that anybody's talking about with you. But be that as it may. But the other one, the more I guess frightening, maybe is the way to put it. Frightening is maybe too harsh a word. Is when people will say this isn't how the comic business works, and I'm aware of that. And what I'm describing is things that the comic business could do to unscrew itself. Like if the business looked at it this way, it would operate much more efficiently. And I always love people kind of zooming in going, that's not how comics works. Yes, I'm aware. That's why it's screwed up in this area. That's why it's screwed up. It is funny. And you live long enough, you get to see people kind of repeat the same arguments over and over again, particularly around the newsstand. I don't know why, by the way, because I've had several. These are the arguments I get into with people outside of comics tends to be the exact percentage of wokeification that are going on. The arguments I get with people inside comics are around often very frustrating topics. Like I've made this statement: if comics were in the newsstand, they would sell more because there would be more places for the comics to be bought. And I'm had an editor come like, well, how do you know that's true? Like, because of the basic principle of volume. Like, it's how? What do you mean? How do I know it? Like, that's a very weird thing to argue about. If your product is sold more places, you will sell more product. Yes, that is true. That is classic volume play principles going on there. It's just weird. It's weird that people want to argue that particular topic. I always get into these newsstand arguments, and I expect somebody's going to argue with me, going, "Well, the newsstand doesn't exist the way it used to," which is true. The newsstand is definitely different, and the exact percentage of lift that you would get from putting comics outside the comic store is a little hard to determine. It's not apples to apples anymore. It wouldn't look like how it looked in the 80s because it's a different newsstand. But that doesn't mean you don't do it. Like if you get the opportunity to put your comics, your Marvel, and Walmart or Target or CVS or Rite Aid or the places like that approach you and say, we'd like you to give us your 10 hottest comics a week and we'll put it on a little spinner rack here in the store. Like you do that. You definitely do that. Why in the world would you not do that? Anyway, madness. All right, so let's get to this question. I've rambled enough, but it helps. So, hey, Perch, don't know if you'll see this message or not. With how popular become your... Oh, thank you. I don't think I'm popular, though. I think people hate watch. I'm very convinced. I want to take a minute to say I've been happy to find your videos on Odyssey whenever I get the chance, since I'm trying to avoid Google and their censorship lately. I had completely forgotten that the videos are over there as well. There was a little plug-in that it's like connect it to this and they will grab this. You post onto YouTube and then they'll grab it and put it over there. Somebody told me the other day that not more a couple months ago the other day. It's like, well, Odyssey is a hate platform. You can't have your stuff over there. People are going to think you're weird. And I'm like, I I just connected the API, man. I had forgotten I'd done it at one point. So I don't know what to tell you about hate platform. Is Odyssey a hate platform? I don't think so. I think it's just a YouTube competitor. I have this theory, by the way, that after the last couple of years, I don't think this is any kind of earth-shaking theory, by the way. After the last couple of years and watching how effective it's been for people to call people out for being fascists or Nazis or whatever it happens to be, that now if you're a big company and somebody comes at you as a competitor, like if you're Facebook and you decide your big competitor is Twitter, for example, why wouldn't you hire some kind of sneaky kind of underground marketing people to start portraying Twitter as hate speech place? Like, it seems like that's become that's going to be a corporate go-to. Everything always evolves from kind of people to anyway. All right, let me get back to this mail. So I'm getting way off track. It's early in the week, and I'm all excited about everything. I just saw the trailer for the Justice League Pets movie, or whatever it's called, and it confused the heck out of me. Why would DC go out of their way to make their characters nearly unrecognizable visually, vocally, and thematically, when it would seemingly take much less energy and lead to much better conversion of young audiences if they were just to portray the characters similarly and in a unified way to how they're portrayed in almost every other media? I felt similarly about the Ruby Justice League crossover book when it came out. I'm not saying the crossover was a failure. I think it was actually more creative than the obvious approach would have been, or that DC Pets movie won't make a lot of money. I'm sure it will. But why does DC seem so eager to go the extra work of kicking themselves in the shins when being lazy would arguably have been smarter, not to mention cheaper without the stunt casting, for the sake of audience conversion? In both directions, actually. Anyway, hope you're doing well. Maybe someday I'll see you in a comic shop. I hope so. Um, yeah, so if there's one true thing about comics, is that they're masters of snatching the very difficult way from the jaws of easy victory. Um, Comics makes it very hard for themselves, and it's very weird. As I've done some videos, trying to get into why does this happen? What's it rooted in? And the common denominator that I always come back to is just a general misunderstanding about their audience and a general inadequacy they feel about comics. Now, how does that play into here? Well, if you talk to people in comics, oftentimes, if the conversation goes on for any length of time, they'll start saying things like, it's just comics, or, it's not like the movies, or, we're the tiny, ant on the hill, or they use these analogies that portray themselves as small, as insignificant, as just not worth much. And it's rooted, I think, from kind of the days when comic books were not as cool. But it's been a long time since those have been the days. In the 80s, while comics were certainly less popular there than they are today, as kind of a general theme, it's like, oh, nerds read comics. Not really. In the 80s, they were starting to get more popular, especially with kids. Now, if you're a 40-year-old man reading a comic book, on the subway, people might look at you funny, but chances are, if you're really engrossed in a comic, you wouldn't care anyway. But it feels like that inadequacy has really been internalized and centralized inside of people, and it causes them to almost believe it can't be easy to make money. They've got to work extra hard in order to make the same money that the music industry or the entertainment industry makes. Now, the baffling part about that is you have these comic characters as more world known, more recognizable, arguably more money drawn than at any point in their history. You have the Guardians of the Galaxy. You have you have Rocket Raccoon costumes for Halloween in Walmarts. I mean, there is no shortage of attention to comics. If you work in comics, you do not have to believe that you are some kind of lesser, doing kind of nerd geek work that you're going to get beat up for. That's not how it operates anymore. It hasn't operated like that for a very, very long time, but a lot of these decisions seem rooted there. So when they go to things like Super Pets, it's like, well, we can't possibly make just a movie or a cartoon based off of kind of the existing comics. No one would like that. No one really reads those comics. We need to do something. We need to reimagine it for Hollywood. We need, about people like pets. I know. Let's use these superhero costumes and put pets in them, and then that will be popular. That's where people's minds go, and it's weird. It's unnecessary, and there's countless evidence that they'll be just fine as they are, and it would be easy. It would be, as you say, and I love the line. Do the lazy thing. Just be lazy. Don't work so hard. I have a very good developer friend who's an engineer, and he wants to be lazy. His job is to write the code once, write it well so he doesn't have to write it a second time. So he's an extremely good developer. He's one of the best that I've ever met and worked with. And his secret, his unlockable secret is that he's lazy. He does not want to spend all of his time writing, rewriting, and going over the code again. And with comics, the same thing. I mean, there are some great storylines that have been market tested well with customers, and you almost just need somebody at a high level. And this is where it's a shame that the Joe Quesadas or the Jim Lees, people who grew up with comics, who are professed to be lovers of comics, or Cebulski or any of these people, why they don't, Cebulski wouldn't matter, but Quesada and Lee, who do have a tie-in to the movies, just step in and say, people want to throw all the excuses in the world why you can't do it that way. Well, you can't do a, high budget animated Secret Wars movie. Well, why not? Well, because it was out in the 80s. I mean, it's dated and bad. Superheroes fighting each other is dated? Yeah, I don't think so. Try again. It's like, well, people won't know who a lot of these characters are. What, as opposed to knowing the talking tree in Guardians of the Galaxy that made hundreds of millions of dollars, that we're worried about that. They just did a show about Peacemaker on HBO that was very, very popular. Like, you got to be kidding me, right? No, try again. I mean, you can knock down any argument for just going out the door and copying. I mean, the biggest and most compelling argument not to do this stuff as a movie, to create this synergy that you're talking about in this letter, is that it costs too much. That's been the barrier. Why wouldn't you do Secret Wars the movie? Because it would be very expensive. So why don't you animate it? Seriously, with Disney, why don't you go knock on the doors of Pixar over there and say, hey, make Secret Wars the movie. We're going to, in concert with that, put out special anniversary editions of Secret Wars in hardcover and everything else. So we're selling more books. We're going to create a ongoing series called Tales of Secret War, or whatever it happens to be, which just features kind of stories of the characters, because a lot was happening there, and we saw a limited series. We're going to get Mike Zeck over here to draw a bunch of covers for us to kind of commemorate the whole thing. I mean, that would be very easy to do, extremely easy to do. Just do that. It's better synergy with your different departments. Put out some toys. Are you kidding me? The Secret Wars toys already sold well years ago. You're telling me that you can't put out another line and it would do great? Clothing and just look at all this stuff. And from a synergy perspective, at some point you want to put some of the X-Men and other things into live action. So I know you've already done it, but I'm saying for Disney in the MCU, you want to do that. Things like Secret Wars as a animated cartoon making a lot of money will tell you a little bit about what's going to work, what isn't, when you get there, and you actually do spend the extra money to do it. Anyway, these things are all easy, but it's definitely rooted in this belief of, well, we definitely have to change things up because no fan, no customer, no person who reads comics is representative of the mass market. To the contrary, I think people who read comics are absolutely connected into pop culture and the mass market. And it's time for people to grow up a little bit and stop thinking that comics are some kind of, weird niche nerd hobby. It's dumb. Anyway, that's my opinion. Thanks for the question. Great question. And yeah, be lazy. Be lazy. Make more money. Make it easier on yourself. Thanks for listening.